But let's get to the big story yesterday. The Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, known as the FCCPC, yesterday cracked down on the activities of online money lender Soko Lending Limited. The FCCPC says the enforcement against the on-lending company was due to the activities being carried out against extant laws and regulations around consumer protection in Nigeria. But there is more in and around that Thursday enforcement action. Joining me now for a discussion today is Babatunde Irukera, the Vice Chairman and CEO of the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. A warm welcome to you on the show tonight, sir. Thanks for coming through. We appreciate you've been a very busy time for you, and we're just heading to the weekend. But very quickly before you have a TGIF, give me more insights into your enforcement action yesterday for the online money lending operator.
Good evening, thank you. It was just one in a series of regulatory interventions. We had conducted similar interventions in the past, including in March, and continued investigations and engaging a number of the money lenders. Soko Loan, however, accounts for a significant size of the market, both from a loan standpoint, from a number of app standpoint, and from violation standpoint. And they had been quite recalcitrant and quite difficult to track. And so we spent the first few months gathering intelligence about where to find them. And so we found them in multiple locations and looked for the right time when business was going on. And so we enforced against them yesterday. But that's just one. And in addition to the enforcement yesterday, we entered some of the widest ranging orders that we have since we started this investigation, which is against payment systems, additional orders against banks, technology companies, including the mobile network operators, and Google, continuing with Google. And then we released the new limited interim regulatory guidelines for how money lenders can start business. And for those who are already in business, they've got 90 days to comply, or else we will shut the business down.
Okay, so, but I'm going to ask you, how deep is the problem of consumer abuse, among other issues that you have been uncovered and under investigations in the digital and fintech business segment?
Quite deep, but I'm glad to say that in the past, I want to say 5 months, we've seen dramatic reductions. I would say that we're down no less than 75%. I believe with the broad efforts that occurred yesterday, both from an enforcement standpoint and from a regulatory standpoint, there will be significant appreciable reduction. And the key issues continue to be, well, not so much the defamatory messages anymore, although some of that still occur. Now we're focusing on abusive conduct towards the borrowers themselves and loan terms that either seem unclear or exploitative.
Is this an industry-wide thing, as it were? Are you seeing beyond? We talked about crowdfunding, which was also an issue. You've been enforcement in the fintech and financial services space. How much more are you doing? And are there other agencies that are involved in this joint regulatory task force? The statement you issued yesterday had a statement that says it's a joint regulatory and enforcement task force, kind of.
Yes, and that's something the FCCPC hosts, and it started at the end of last year when we were developing or designing an intervention strategy. And so it's the Central Bank of Nigeria, NICTA, EFCC, ICPC, the FCCPC. And so
please go ahead.
Everything we've done so far are the products of the engagement with the Joint Task Force, and even the interim guidelines that were released yesterday was product of our collaboration and the work we've all done together. Everybody's keen on this. We recognize what the problem is. The central bank speaks about it repeatedly. NIDA has done some work in the area, but jointly now I think we're making a far greater impact than any of the individual agencies have made before.
Okay, so interesting, and I was just to talk about that, Neil. What you said on page 2 of your statement yesterday that needs to be complied with everyone moving forward. Break it down for me. What is in that particular enforcement that you said has to be complied with forthwith?
So the new guidelines require that you will procure an approval from the adopted guidelines by the Joint Regulatory and Enforcement Task Force, secretariated at the FCCPC. So pursuant to the FCCPA, we have written these guidelines. It requires a bunch of information, typically identities of promoters of a business, how to find the business, the feedback mechanism of the business, and some transparency in its disclosures, its loan repayment calculations, and its interest policy. And so they have to provide that. And when they provide that, we would provide a written approval that allows them to proceed with their business if the Joint Regulatory and Enforcement Task Force is satisfied. Now, Google will not put a new app on the Play Store without that approval. And for the apps that are currently on the Play Store, Google has already been informed about this order, and they have 90 days starting from yesterday to comply and regularize, or their apps will be taken down. The same thing goes for the payment systems, typically OPay, Flutterwave, Monify, and I think Paystack. Those are the top payment systems that are being used. Also, the key technology companies that provide backbone, hosting service, server services, and even connectivity are also prohibited from providing services to companies like that without evidence that they have secured their approval.
How far-reaching is this particular enforcement in terms of, because now we're going beyond just the online lending companies, you're going to the fintech and those who are in the entire value chain or the ecosystem, as it were. So, in terms of what the other government agencies are bringing to the table, for example, the central bank, at some point are we likely to see some measure of taking some judicial actions when these investigations are concluded and having a formal legal case brought against folks who have abused consumer rights and things of that nature?
So you're correct. The central bank is also looking at the scope of current regulatory oversight, and that's why the guidelines are limited and interim. We expect the financial institutions regulator, who's really taking a stronger look at what to extend some of its oversight to. I'm sure that in the coming months, there'll be some clarity, and the CBN has actually repeatedly, for some of the businesses that actually carry CBN license, some microfinance banks have these loan platforms, and the CBN continues to regulate and monitor that. As a matter of fact, we know that only CBN, the Consumer Protection Department of the CBN, has just really completed a round of oversight visits and scrutiny over some of the businesses. So I'm sure that we'll begin to see a lot more action. With respect to judicial activity, the FCCPC is currently prosecuting at least one of the businesses for two different things. One is obstruction of justice, attempts to compromise employees of the FCCPC, and also with respect to their conduct. We're also prosecuting even their consultants, including their outside counsel, who collaborated with them and assisted with connecting them to government operatives that they tried to compromise. We expect that there'll be additional prosecutions as we gather more information. It's too early to tell about the information we got from Sokolon yesterday, but it's, I think I can confidently say that we've gathered sufficient information that is likely to result in some criminal charges against Sokolon and some of his operatives.
Interesting what you're doing on the ground and looking to sanitize the system. Do you have any word for Nigerians who patronize these online digital services in terms of what they should look out for before sometimes it's too late?
There are two things I'd like to say. One is you've got to become more conversant with the terms. Don't sign off on anything without knowing exactly what you're getting into. And the other thing I'd have to say is to the other extreme, and that is that inevitably we're discovering that there are some citizens who actually take these loans without an intention to pay back. With the way the framework is developing and institutionalizing how the business should be run, sooner than later there will be ways to hold, just as we're holding the businesses accountable, sooner than later there will be ways to hold borrowers accountable too. So they have to pay back what they borrow.
That would be great. All right, stand by, sir, for this break. We move on to discuss the role of anti-competition agencies under the new intra-Africa trade agreement. Just a bit of what you folks discussed at the meeting earlier this week with the head of the AFCFTA, Wamkele. We'll talk about that, everyone. Stand by. We'll be right back into it. Welcome back and thanks for your time. Babatunde Irukera, the head of the FCCPC, for standing by with us at our Abuja studios. Thank you so much, sir. So let's just change gear a little bit from what you're doing in Nigeria to the recent meeting of all the heads of national and regional anti-competition agencies across Africa, which was chaired by the AFCFTA chief Wamkele. Give me some of the key issues that you folks discussed.
So what it was that the chief executives of the competition agencies across the continent were meeting with the Secretary General of the Continental Free Trade Agreement Agency, and the point was that the next round of negotiations centers around the free markets and consumer protection. As you probably know, what the free trade agreement also does is to be taking steps to creating Africa into a single market, a single custom area. But there are obviously key issues there with respect to the differences in the states and their markets. And so negotiating the protocols for competition and consumer protection is vital. And the current framework is such that many countries have their own competition authority, as Nigeria does, and then there are regional competition authorities, as ECOWAS has one, and the same thing with the South, the East, COMESA being one of the biggest and most popular on the continent. And so to the extent that ultimately the desire of the African Union is to have a continent-wide competition authority, the question of how each competition authority from national to regional feeds into that and how to avoid duplication, determine questions of jurisdiction, what kind of mergers would be reserved exclusively for the continental one, and what kind of cross-border investigations or issues would be mutual and how would they be addressed. And so we had quite a robust meeting. It was quite full and frank. Now, the one thing that's very clear is that there are very diverse approaches across the continent, and we still need to work together, build consensus and some level of clarity as we proceed. I'm quite confident that we would ultimately build the right consensus.
Well, how is the FCCPC looking into the issues of competition in the region, in West Africa and Africa-wide, in the interest of Nigeria? What needs to be done and how quickly? Where do you see Nigeria within the new AFCFTA based on some of the discussions that you already have?
Good. Nigeria has scaled up very quickly since it promulgated its own competition legislation in 2019, and I might modestly say that we are actually considered one of the leading regulators on the continent and certainly in the region. And our focus has always been based on what is best for Nigeria. And so I think there's some clarity about where we're going. and there's significant clarity about how we want to get there. And in engaging in the region, we find that we're also comfortable. Currently, Nigeria chairs both as the primary chair and the alternate chair of the consultative and steering committee of the ECOWAS region and competition regulatory authority. And so that leadership role has obviously been a benefit or certainly an asset in how we develop competition regulation in the region. Interestingly, we're also engaged in collaborations across boundaries. For instance, we've just recently opened an investigation with respect that was a request from a member of the ECOWAS. Is based on a business that is exporting into the other ECOWAS states. And this is because the business is located in Nigeria and manufactures for its entire West and Central Africa market from Nigeria. The allegation is that the conduct of the company going out of Nigeria is distorting markets in other parts of ECOWAS because there are certain incentives that Nigeria provides to promote export, which operate as subsidies on the other side, and subsidies generally distort the market. It's a new investigation, and we're working at that. And it's a good example of the collaboration that is required, not just in the region, but across the continent.
In terms of what Nigeria and how Nigeria is positioning within the AFCFTA, from a anti-competition point of view, are you seeing a bigger picture, the wider picture of what Nigeria really needs to do, and very quickly?
Yeah, the one thing I think Nigeria needs to do very quickly is strengthen its own competition regulatory framework, both from a statute and guidance standpoint and from an enforcement standpoint, because Nigeria is the largest market on the continent. And one of the things that would come with a single custom area is more robust competition, because options and choices come in the market. But we have to be very concerned about whether people can exploit the framework in a way that redounds against Nigeria's benefit. It will be potentially problematic if, for instance, businesses that are not within the continent but wanting to take advantage of the protocols just come and set up a company just on the border of Nigeria, for instance, just to make products and sell them into the Nigerian market without complying with all the other requirements. And those are real serious concerns, and they're existential difficulties. And so what Nigeria needs is just more vigilance and certainly a clearer and stronger approach to negotiating as we proceed. The FCCPC is working with the Office of the Trade Negotiator on behalf of the country. And so we're working at that to make sure that we cut the deal that we believe is best for our country. We're also engaging with the Manufacturers Association and the organized private sector just to be sure that we're fair to others, and the cost of that fairness is not unfairness to ourselves.
We really appreciate your time, and we wish you all the best of your team, what you're doing at the FCCPC. Thank you so much. Irukera, the Vice Chairman and CEO. Have a great weekend.